And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us here on a Monday evening. A lot of trade talk happening around the NBA today. Some news about the Dallas Mavericks. I know we got quite a few Mavs fans with us. We've got some Raptors news for you. Timberwolves, Lakers, Hornets, Suns. There's a lot of news to get to. So without further ado, let's get right to it. First and foremost, the Dallas Mavericks are now willing to trade just about anybody on their roster not named Luka Doncic. This marks a very different front office stance anyway as far as their approach to roster building. They've been trying to build through chemistry for the better part of the last decade, and it just hasn't worked. They need to build up the talent. We saw in the early years of the Dirk Nowitzki era with the Dallas Mavericks that their key was always churning that roster, turning it over, and turning it over until they got enough talent that they could build on that chemistry and finally make that one final move to push them over the top to get them to the NBA Finals and win a championship. That's the formula that they need to adopt here with Luka Doncic. They need to go ahead and try to build up that talent pool, see if they can trade for it further and further and further again, and just see what a series of trades ultimately ends up netting you. Now, it sounds like they're going to be looking for a superstar at this deadline. However, there's not a lot of superstars on the market this year. I would argue the top player on the market is OG Anunoby. We put a video out about that as far as what it might ultimately cost the Dallas Mavericks to get that done. But we'll see if they ultimately decide to do that. I still believe they need another ball handler next to Dinwiddie and Doncic on the floor. Hardaway's a nice shooter, but he's a little bit streaky. He's a guy that could have some value around the league with teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Lakers, all needing perimeter help, help on the wing. There's a lot of teams out there that could use some wing help. Now that the Mavericks are willing to talk about Dorian Finney-Smith when they were not willing to do so before, that's opened up a whole different trade avenue that they could go down. The Utah Jazz have already been named as one of the most active teams after Dorian Finney-Smith, after that news came out from Callie Kaplan of the Dallas Morning News. But thank you guys for coming back in. Welcome back, Matt and Zach. Appreciate you for coming back. White Sox going to go 93 and 69. I don't know. That's going to be a tough division. As far as the Guardians and the Twins, I think are all going to be right there. 93 isn't too big of a number, though, but I think I could see that happening. I just wonder about the ability of their bounce back candidates to really have that big of a bounce back season, so we'll see if they get it done. But we will have MLB for you guys later on this week. Jump into some of the news that we've had: the Yandy Diaz extension, the extension for Jeffrey Springs, Peter Fairbanks, etc. Tampa Bay Rays have certainly been active. We had a trade today between the Boston Red Sox and the Miami Marlins, sending Matt Barnes anyway, down to the Miami Marlins in exchange for Richard Blyer. So we did have a move for those of you who are baseball fans. But we want to kind of stick to the trade deadline talk. We will be live for you guys on Thursday, February 9th, the NBA trade deadline day. So make sure you guys join us for that. Hit that subscribe button and the like button on this video. It really does help us out. And we'll keep you guys updated on everything we can possibly, all the news that's out there. Keep you guys updated as much as we possibly can. But let's start around the league anyway. First and foremost with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Put a video out this morning about the possibility of a trade for D'Angelo Russell. It said that the Timberwolves are looking for either A, first-round pick, or B, their preference is to get a scorer, somebody who can replace the production of a D'Angelo Russell, maybe a point guard as well. That first video we put out today kind of helped you see what that could end up being like, looking like. There is some traction as far as the trade rumors out there about possibly Tim Hardaway Jr. going to the Charlotte Hornets, Terry Rozier going to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and D'Angelo Russell going to Dallas. That's something that could be out there for you guys. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled. That's kind of the Hornets news as well, is that they have Terry Rozier and most of their roster on the trade block as well. They're said to be seeking a first-round pick or talent in return for either one of Mason Plumlee or Terry Rozier. Their ask is preferably a first-round pick, so I don't think taking back another contract would be their preference, but it's another way that they could go to try to make that team a little bit better around LaMelo Ball. This team is not going to go anywhere this year. They're struggling to keep their head above water. They seem to be on track to be one of the worst 4 teams in all of the NBA this year, and that would get them a really nice lottery pick. And so, that might be the thing for them as far as what their goal is the rest of the way. Tank as much as they can, get another high-quality pick, and then build towards next year. But we'll see which way they end up going. They spent in free agency a couple of years ago to bring in Gordon Hayward. That contract's looking terrible. So maybe there's a 3-team deal out there that they could offload some of that money and be able to, free up their books a little bit by getting rid of that Gordon Hayward contract anyway. Yes, AJ Alexei did get claimed, but he was from the Rangers. He's bounced around since the end of the season after he was DFA'd by the Rangers. He's bounced around, I believe, to 2 or 3 teams now. But we should see how it goes. Did you make it to a fan fest? I did not. Unfortunately, had a lot of coworkers out the past week or 2 with COVID, so we had multiple associates out at my 9-to-5 job, if you will, and had to work and hold down the fort, if you, as you say anyway. But hopefully, maybe next year. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of news from around the league. The Miami Heat are not actively shopping Kyle Lowry. They are looking for wing upgrades. They're said to be in on Jay Crowder. We saw some news about Jay Crowder and the Milwaukee Bucks. Remember the trade that sent Rui Hachimura to the Lakers? There was a 3-team deal that would have sent Hachimura to the Suns, Crowder to the Bucks, and picks anyway going back to the Washington Wizards. That ultimately is not didn't happen, obviously. The framework that they had been discussing between Milwaukee and the Suns was Grayson Allen and picks going back to the Suns in exchange for Drake Crowder. The Suns want no part of Grayson Allen, and I can't really blame him. I believe he does have some history with Chris Paul, if I remember correctly, as well. There's also some news on that. But it seems like Jay Crowder is very likely to move here at the deadline. It's just a matter of where. I believe there's a number of teams looking at him to try to bring him in. He's got 1 year left on his deal, will be a free agent after the year. He's going to probably command maybe 1 or 2 second-round picks. He hasn't played all season, so I wouldn't expect anything more than that. Suns, if you're hoping to get more than that, I think you're fooling yourself. But we'll see how they end up going. But the Phoenix Suns, there's some rumors with the new ownership group there that they want to make some moves. They want to be very active. They want to spur this team on to the future. They are looking to possibly move on from CP3 as a way of offloading some salary, interjecting some younger talent in there, even if it means taking back lesser talent in return to free up their books in the long run, because they do have some money already tied up in Bridges, in Booker, in Ayton now. Cam Johnson, of course, is going to be having a big contract coming up in the next year or so. So they've got some issues looming, and getting rid of CP3 now, getting somebody in there who could be a younger point guard that could stick with this team a little bit longer than what CP3 would, might be of interest to them. There was even a trade floated today about CP3 going to the Lakers straight up for Russell Westbrook. I don't think that's happening in either side. I don't think that trade really looks good to either team, but we'll see what ends up happening. I think the Suns, these rumors coming out about them, I think this just leads to more rumors as far as the offseason when we might see some actual movement for them. I think this year they're pretty much set with what they're going to roll with, outside of maybe some wing additions and some point guard additions, some backup role player type additions to this team. Otherwise, I think they're pretty much set. There's only a few teams out there looking to cataclysmically change their roster, and that would be the Dallas Mavericks right now. I think would be at the top of that list. I think they should have done it earlier at this point, honestly, but it seems like they're finally getting all their eggs in one basket and trying to push towards getting that superstar next to Luka, and then building up their talent base, and then trying to build out their chemistry. But we'll see how things end up going. Let me try to see what we got here. Got a few messages from you guys. Welcome in, Tim. When's MLB's opening day? End of March. You think Dallas is going to get rid of salary and not trying to win this year? I don't think they're trying to get rid of salary. I don't buy this Matt Moore of the Action Network. He's trying to put out there that they're trying to offload long-term contracts to sign guys in free agency. Who exactly are they going to bring in free agency? Karis LeVert? He's a little bit better version of Tim Hardaway Jr. in my opinion, but he's always had issues as far as meshing with his teammates. That's been the issue before that we saw with the Indiana Pacers. We saw that again with the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. He's not able to get fit into that rotation as easily as everybody had thought. And he's going to be a free agent after this year anyway. So if you trade for him right now, if you do the 1-for-1 trade that's been rumored over the past month, Hardaway for LeVert, I'm not really sure that really moves you up anywhere aside from just saving money for free agency. But again, they're going to be over the cap as it is right now. And even if you do get below the cap number, if you're able to spend in free agency, the best options out there are not exactly superstar level players that you might be able to bring in. Maybe you're looking at a Fred VanVleet, but that's going to take trimming your roster way down, and we're talking about adding talent to this team, not losing talent. Now, sure, you look at Fred VanVleet and say, yes, he'd be a great number 2 guy next to Doncic, but is he really a number 2? I think he's more of a number 3, but he's a really good ball handler, which is what the Dallas Mavericks need. I just don't think that they should go the way of selling out to save money for free agency, because they've tried that strategy year after year after year, and it just doesn't work out. The way they did it in the beginning with Dirk Nowitzki was trades. The Antoine Jameson trade, the Devin Harris trade, the Antoine Walker trade, Rafe LaFrentz, Nick Van Axel. The list goes on and on and on as far as the trades that they made. And that's how they got their talent base up. They had some hits in the draft as well. Josh Howard. They had a second-round pick, undrafted free agent, and Marquise Daniels for a time. Devin Harris was a top 5 pick. They made the trade for Jason Terry as well. They made the trade for Jason Kidd. Noticing a trend here, they made the trade for Eric Dampier. They made the trade for Tyson Chandler. That's the way the Mavericks built their roster up and then let that roster gel once they had enough talent. They did it the exact opposite way. They let that roster gel with undrafted picks or undrafted players like Dorian Finney-Smith. While he's gotten a lot better, and because of that continuity there, he's become a more valuable commodity for the Dallas Mavericks, but they haven't necessarily built up the talent base as quickly as I would have liked. The trade for Kristaps Porzingis, a nice gamble, ultimately didn't work out. You did get Spencer Dinwiddie out of it, I guess, at this point. Gives you a nice secondary ball handler, but you need another one to take the ball out of the hands of Luka Doncic and allow him to rest at least time to time, and still have some offense on the floor when Luka needs to take a few minutes of a break anyway during the game. But we'll see which way they end up going. Jay Crowder to Bulls for Kobe White. That would be an interesting move. I think that would actually work for both sides. Kobe White is certainly available for the Chicago Bulls. Jay Crowder would kind of fit in nicely with their forward regiment there. I told you guys this offseason that the Zach LaVine signing was basically going to cap the Bulls at being a top five team at best because I didn't think they were cracking the top four. And I think they're going to be bounced in the first round of the playoffs no matter how they decide to improve this team. That's why I was mystified at the signing of Zach LaVine. I thought they should have traded him while his contract was still manageable. You could have gotten some real value back for him. Gotten a couple of first round picks. You could have gotten some nice contracts coming back to you. Now with this big salary, you're going to have to take back some bad contracts or and just get picks, or you're going to have to get really good players and maybe a pick in return. But I think the Bulls should have done something different than what they did this offseason. As it stands right now, sure, tinkering around the edges sounds nice, but again, I still think you're going to be bounced in the first round, and then you're going to have to shake it up. We've seen LaVine and DeRozan not really mesh together at the beginning of the year. LaVine's performed well over the past couple of months, and he seems to be at the peak of his performance right now. But again, I just don't see where's the improvement for the Bulls? Even if you make the trade for Crowder, are you really beating the Milwaukee Bucks in a playoff series? Are you beating the 76ers? Are you beating the Nets? Are you beating the Celtics? Are you beating the Cavaliers? I think all of those teams you probably lose in a 7-game series to right now. And so that's my issue with the Bulls is that you've done a nice job building up some talent, but I think you've reached the zenith of what that talent is going to get you. If I was Dallas, I would try to trade for as many first-round picks as you can and try for next year for a second star. I think that's a possibility. The one idea that was floated out by Matt Moore is moving on from a Dorian Finney-Smith, getting a first-round pick back, maybe some other assets, getting a Jordan Clarkson back. I don't like that idea as much as far as the Jordan Clarkson idea, or maybe a guy on an expiring deal. Just to get off of the contract of a Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith is a great defensive player. He has real value. He's on a team-friendly contract. He is worth a first-round pick plus. And so if you guys paid attention to the first video I put out today about the potential 3-team deal between the Lakers, Timberwolves, and Mavs, kind of had Dorian Finney-Smith going to the Lakers, solving their wing depth issues, giving them another good defender at the wings to let LeBron kind of take a breather on that end of the floor, not having to guard Kawhi Leonard or Paul George in a playoff series. Allow Hachimura and Finney-Smith to take the first crack at him, and then as the game wears on, maybe you rotate LeBron onto him as the game gets close and see what he can do. But that would be something that would be intriguing to the LA Lakers because they absolutely need wings. Only surrendering one first-round pick to get it done would be ideal for them, especially for a player of Dorian Finney-Smith's caliber, especially considering he's on a team-friendly deal. Of course, the Mavericks would have gotten D'Angelo Russell back in that deal as well, and ultimately would just cost them 2 rotation players in Hardaway and Dorian Finney-Smith. That's something that would be a real attractive piece for the Mavericks, gives them ammunition for the future. Am I going to stream any preseason MLB games? Probably not. I'm going to be streaming probably some hockey and basketball around that time. Welcome in, Etai. Think the Lakers will make a move? I do think they'll at least make one big move. How big remains to be seen. They could go out there and trade 2 first-round picks along with Russell Westbrook, Lonnie Walker, Pat Beverly, and try to bring in a Buddy Hield, etc. I don't think that's the avenue that ultimately go down because Miles Turner is now locked up. He is not going to be moved at this year's deadline because he just signed that 2-year extension. There's the trade idea possibility for Bojan Bogdanovic from the Pistons. He would be a nice addition to that front court, but again, is he worth 2 first-round picks? I don't think so. There's some opportunities for them to improve. It's just a matter of which option they decide to go. The idea that was floated earlier, or that I mentioned, was the CP3 for Russell Westbrook. Straight up, I don't think it makes sense for either team. There'd have to be other pieces involved, maybe attaching a Jay Crowder and a pick going back the other way, however you decide to structure it. But there's some interesting opportunities for the Lakers to make some moves. They try every year for free agents and don't work. They need capital for trade. I agree, Tim. Would love Kuzma on this team or Clarkson on this team. Clarkson, again, is on an expiring deal. He's looking for massive money in free agency. We're not going to be able to afford him. We're already $33 million in a tax already. And I just don't think that Mark Cuban's really, I don't think he's worried about the tax per se, but I think it limits your options as far as taking on further payroll to bring in a $37 million contract of a star. Jordan Clarkson is not a star. He's a nice player, but he's not worth $20+ million on this current roster. We already have that player locked up with Spencer Dinwiddie. He's going to have 1 year left after the season. I think getting his contract extension done would be a great thing for them. I would agree with you. Kuzma would have been great on this team. However, we just saw the game between the Wizards and Mavericks. Kuzma and Dinwiddie kind of had a back and forth anyway after the game through Twitter, basically saying, Dinwiddie, you saw the way the Wizards play. It's not a way of winning basketball. Kuzma basically clapped back at him. So I don't think there's any way that type of a trade happens right now just because of the locker room issue. I do think that they're trying to improve the talent base of this team more than anything else right now, and so that's what's really spurred on the Mavericks to really go after a second superstar to improve the talent of the overall roster, bringing in somebody like an OG Anunoby, a Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, whichever way they end up going to go for another star. But there's not any really big mega stars out there right now. Everybody at the time when Nico Harrison was signed pointed to Damian Lillard as the guy that could be brought into the Dallas Mavericks. I don't think that's going to happen during the season. Maybe getting some ammunition now for a trade in the offseason might be the way to go. But if I'm the Mavericks, the first thing I try to do is improve the roster around me first and then move forward after that. But if you guys are just joining us here at the Upside, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Keep you guys updated around the NBA. Keep you guys updated on what's going on. Remember that the Clippers are looking for a point guard. They were connected to Mike Conley. Their top target, as of a few hours ago, has been reported to be Fred VanVleet. That would be a very interesting move for them because they would have to offload some big contracts in order to get that kind of a deal done. They've, of course, sent a bunch of draft picks away in the Paul George deal, etc. But so they do have some assets left at the moment, but they don't have the premium assets I think that would be required to get something even bigger than that done. So I think the max of what they could do is Fred VanVleet. But you're talking about a team taking on Luke Kennard or a contract like that to be able to get it done. That's going to be a tough ask. Luke Kennard, while he's a good offensive weapon, really struggles on the defensive end of the floor, and that was the case before he signed the big contract with the Clippers. I think they're going to have to trade somebody that's in their rotation that plays a little bit better, like a Norman Powell. He's on a nice contract. I would expect him to possibly be the piece that would entice another team to bite down on it if they're trying to bring in a point guard of that level. Now, of course, they've tried the John Wall thing. He's trying to play a different way than he ever has in his career before this point, and he's really struggling to adjust to it. He's trying. Tyronn Lue's really complimented on him as far as his effort to try to make it work there, but it just isn't working so far. I think getting them a traditional point guard would be exactly what exactly what the doctor ordered for them. Plus, he has some familiarity working with Kawhi Leonard in Toronto. So again, familiarity, another piece that they really like, a little bit higher quality than Mike Conley. So keep your eyes peeled for what could happen there. They also have been connected to D'Angelo Russell as well, and Mike Conley, as I mentioned. Another piece of information on the Chicago Bulls, for those of you who are Chicago fans, there was an asking price set for Alex Caruso of 2 first-round picks. He is going to be the toughest piece to move here at the deadline. I think if a team is really that desperate for a point guard of his ilk, really nice defender, has good versatility, is able to distribute the ball, isn't going to dominate the ball, allows your superstars to be superstars, I think a player like that would be invaluable to a team, but I don't think it's worth 2 first-round picks, which is why I ultimately believe he'll stay in Chicago after the trade deadline. There is some news as far as Jakob Poeltl. There is belief around the industry that Jakob Poeltl will be moved here at the deadline for the price of 2 first-round picks. Now, the Raptors have been connected to him as well as the Boston Celtics. I think the Boston Celtics might see this as the finishing move because they don't really have any other holes on the roster. They addressed their point guard needs and their depth needs anyway with Malcolm Brogdon's addition. Now they can move a guy like White anyway out to be the salary matching part of this trade for Jakob Poeltl and a couple of first-round picks. Probably going to have to be a 3-team trade, though, because I don't see White going back to San Antonio. I don't think that marriage is going to work. The Spurs they're in asset acquisition mode right now, and they're trying to get everything they can out of Poeltl. Poeltl's probably going to get a $20 million contract. I don't think he's worth it. I think it's a mistake by whoever ends up giving it to him, but that seems to be where his market is headed after the season. So if you're going to sign him, make sure you're willing to give him that type of contract after the season is over. We put a video, or we made a video anyway, about the Portland Trailblazers. That will be coming out tomorrow about the ability for them to make some moves here at the deadline. They are trying to make a push for the postseason. They tried this offseason to bring in some nice talent and rework their roster a little bit. They traded away Norm Powell and Robert Covington to the Clippers last year in a mystifying move. By all accounts. Then, of course, Anthony Simons went off at the tail end of last year. The questions were about how he would mesh with Damian Lillard since Damian Lillard was injured at the end of last year. So far, so good, but it hasn't worked as far as win-losses. And I think that's really where the question needs to be on for the Portland Trailblazers is how is this team going to improve from a win-loss standpoint? They started the year great. They were number one in the West for what seemed like about a month, and then have really fallen off. The Denver Nuggets right now, along with the Memphis Grizzlies, are the class of the West, and I don't think any of those teams really scare anybody in the West, though. But the Portland Trailblazers are going to have to make some moves in order to get out of that play-in and into the top six. They made the move for Jeremy Grant. He has still not answered them as far as is he going to accept the contract extension offer or is he going to decline it? He was offered a 4-year, $112 million contract extension. He is eligible for a max at the end of the season, though, and it seems like he might be one of the guys out there that could be overpaid to be able to get that type of a deal done. That's kind of what happened with him the last time he hit free agency. Now his deal looks pretty good. Everybody kind of questioned why he was leaving the Denver Nuggets and not taking the money there. He wanted a bigger role and show that he could be a better, more important piece on a team. That he showed that with the Detroit Pistons. He's showing it again with the Portland Trailblazers. He's been fantastic for them. But if they don't get a contract extension done, if you're Portland, are you willing to lose him for nothing in free agency? Are you really willing to give him a max level contract in order to keep him? The other people that could be on the move from the Portland Trailblazers, Josh Hart and Jusuf Nurkic. Nurkic has been on the trade block before. He still has 3+ years left on his contract as of right now. It's going to be about $15 million per season, I believe. That's going to be a hefty sum. They're looking for, I believe, a LaMarcus Aldridge type, a little bit more of an offensive weapon from both three-point range and being able to finish down low, and still having more of a defensive-minded center there instead of Jusuf Nurkic. Now, as far as Josh Hart, he is expected to have wide interest around the league. A lot of teams are out there being very aggressive on a guy like Josh Hart. Even teams below 500. We're talking about the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic. Magic would make a lot of sense here. They need a veteran guard to kind of come in there, distribute the ball a little bit. Josh Hart could be that, but I think that's a little bit out of his repertoire. That's why they're looking for veteran help to build their young core around a little bit, get them some playoff experience, and at least get them to the play-in tournament. I think is exactly what the Orlando Magic hope for the outcome of this season, and then see what they have after this year. They just got Jonathan Isaac back anyway, who hasn't played in a game since 2020. That's 3 years without playing basketball. That's a long time to go without playing. So far, so good for him. He's been able to remain healthy. He will not be traded here at the deadline. After the season is over, as long as everything checks out medically, he could be an interesting piece for a title contender out there for help, or for teams that need help at the wing. We mentioned a little bit about the Timberwolves. We talked only about D'Angelo Russell. They also have a center there, a backup center, Naz Reid, who's fielding a lot of interest around the league. The Boston Celtics have been connected to him. The LA Clippers have been connected as well. A number of teams who need front court depth, including the Brooklyn Nets, are looking at Naz Reid as far as an option to help their defense in that front court. The Nets specifically are looking for somebody defensive-minded center to come in and back up Nick Claxton. He's been fantastic for them, especially with Kevin Durant out. Once Kevin Durant comes back, Nick Claxton will still have an important role in this team, but I think they want to have somebody that they trust behind him because they don't really have that right now. As far as the LA Clippers, they've been looking for center upgrades for what seems like an entire season now. Zubac has been a nice fit for them, but they've been connected with Miles Turner for over a year. I'd imagine Naz Reid would be a nice addition for them, not necessarily the level of a Miles Turner, but would still help their rotation as well. And we mentioned when we talked about Jakob Poeltl that the Boston Celtics are looking for improvements as far as a big man, somebody who could come in, be an enforcer down low, more of a defensive-minded center. Naz Reid would kind of fit that description. The Timberwolves have struggled to build chemistry all season long with the addition of Rudy Gobert, the loss of their entire bench, now Karl Anthony Towns being out for the better part of 2 months, the inconsistent play at the beginning of the season for D'Angelo Russell. The Timberwolves have not gotten off to a great start this season. They're currently sitting in the play-in tournament if the playoffs were to start today, and they need to kind of tinker with that roster. They don't want to lose D'Angelo Russell for nothing in free agency. He does have a $31.4 million salary for this season, so if you're looking to make a trade for D'Angelo Russell, keep that in mind. make sure you check out our video as far as what could happen with D'Angelo Russell, kind of what they're looking for, either a first-round pick or somebody who could give them similar production back for him and a point guard. If that seems to be the same person, like a Terry Rozier, that would be great for them. If not, then maybe they could do two players and kind of split up the salary a little bit. That's what we did in our video earlier today. Check that out on our YouTube page, Upside Sports Network. Hit that subscribe button and like the video. But that's kind of the latest around the league right now. The Pelicans are one of the teams that have been connected with John Collins, along with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns. All of these teams have pretty much dropped out of that race as well. John Collins has been terrible all season. Career low numbers for him. He's got $25 million on his contract per season for the next 3 seasons. It's not looking pretty as far as the contract right now. He's a solid starter, don't get me wrong, but he's nowhere near the level of player that everybody thought he was going to be when he signed that level of contract. He's been in rumors for the last few years. He was originally offered for 2 first-round picks. Then the asking price was 1 first-round pick. Beginning of the season anyway, it was asking for a role player back in return, and now they can't even get that for John Collins. I think we're looking at John Collins finishing the season in Atlanta. He's been pretty much been talking to the media the entire time, saying, hey, I don't care. I'm tired of this team. I don't want to be here anymore, and they still haven't found a way to trade him. You got to be able to be traded. I mean, you have to play a little bit better if you really want out of Atlanta, and it just doesn't look good. The trade that they made for DeJounte Murray looks good as far as DeJounte Murray is concerned, but the overall team hasn't necessarily performed as well as they had hoped. Trae Young, really hasn't played as well next to him as they would have liked. And there's been some rumors about Trae Young possibly being traded after the season. I think that's all a bunch of hogwash. I think they'll make a whole bunch of other moves before they go that route. I think they'd really like to play those 2 guards next to each other a little longer, see if they can mesh a little bit better. DeJounte Murray's a better all-around player between the two. Trae Young, a better offensive player. But Atlanta's got some questions to answer over the next year. Do they keep Bogdan Bogdanovic? Do they try to offload him in a trade? John Collins, the whole fiasco there. Clint Capella. They have got some questions answered. Of course, DeAndre Hunter is still there, a good 3-and-D type wing player, 3-4 type player that can guard multiple positions. A lot of questions to answer out there in Atlanta. A little bit of news on the Denver Nuggets is that they're looking to try to trade Bones Highland. He's kind of their piece that they're dangling out there to try to get what they need. They're looking for either a backup center like Naz Reid that we just mentioned, or a backup point guard. Now, Derrick Rose has been mentioned as one possible candidate who could go to Denver. That might actually work for both sides. The New York Knicks are willing to work with Derrick Rose to get him to a contender somewhere where he wants to play. That would be a nice fit for him on the Western Conference leading Denver Nuggets. Get really big minutes there behind Jamal Murray, who's back from injury, and he looks fantastic. But they need to get somebody in there to spell him since he is coming off of injury. You don't want to overuse him during the regular season. Bones Highland might be the attractive piece to get somebody else to bite down in order to get the pieces that they need here at the deadline. But some rumors around the Memphis Grizzlies is, what are they going to do after the season when it concerns Dillon Brooks? Do they go ahead and try to trade him now if they're not willing to extend his contract and pay him what he might earn on the open market? Or are they going to try to get that extension done? What could a trade for that or for somebody like that look like? That's really unknown right now. No teams have really been connected for Dillon Brooks, but I'd imagine it'd be all of those wing teams that are needed teams in need of wing help, like the LA Lakers, like the Milwaukee Bucks, etc. But I just wonder if they give them the talent that the Memphis Grizzlies would see as sufficient enough to trade away a guy so important to their roster right now. We haven't really touched on the New York Knicks. They have 3 players that have now been glued to their bench that were rotation pieces in the past: Derrick Rose, Cam Reddish, and Evan Fournier. I see a lot of New York Knicks fans out there trying to trade Evan Fournier for other pieces, not only giving up 1 first-round pick. Right now, Evan Fournier's contract is untradeable unless you're willing to attach a first-round pick to it and just let the other team eat that entire deal. Fournier hasn't been able to, stay in that rotation. Tom Thibodeau doesn't trust him. He is more of a defensive-minded coach, and I understand that, but you still got to be able to stay on the floor if you're making $18 million for the New York Knicks. Derrick Rose, they have a nice guard rotation going, though. He's kind of fallen out of the rotation because the other options that they have are a little bit better and a little younger. Quigley's really taken a step forward this year. They brought in Brunson. They have R.J. Barrett at the guard spot right now. That's kind of your 3-headed monster. And then, of course, they got some young guys there as well that they can kind of filter in for the remainder of those minutes. And then, of course, Cam Reddish. He never really found a solution there in New York. Had the injury issue at the end of last season, never really got into that rotation. He is more of an offensive threat. Again, defensive coach, offensive-minded player. Things aren't necessarily going to be smooth in the beginning, and things just never really got smooth through this entire experiment for the Knicks. And he is going to be moved. It sounds like he's probably going to field at least 1 second-round pick, maybe 2. With the price of Hachimura being 3 second-round picks, I don't expect it to be that high because Hachimura was at least playing in games. He's more of a slasher, 3-and-D type player as well. Brings a lot more intangibles than, say, a guy like Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish, I think, has a lot of untapped potential, but at this point, you're going to have to pay him after the season anyway because he's an RFA. How much are you willing to really give up for a player like that in his walk year? We mentioned that Miles Turner did sign that extension, basically worth 2 years, $58 million, giving him extra money this year to really boost up his value. Largest increase on a single season salary in NBA history of a contract that was already underway for that season. And that's a big thing for the Indiana Pacers. Very nice job, kind of a creative way to get him 2 years, 60, while still keeping his salaries in years 2 and 3 of that. The remainder, the 2 years that they're adding on, at around $20 million. So nice creative work there by the Indiana Pacers. He is not eligible to be traded now because of that extension, but after this season is over, in the offseason, if they're able to find the right trade partner out there, maybe he could move or be moved at that point. But it seems like the Pacers really like their core that they've developed there with Halliburton there at the point, a couple of good young rookies there at the wing, and then of course Miles Turner holding it down low. One of you guys mentioned earlier, I think it was Zach, you mentioned that the Bulls would make a nice fit for Jay Crowder. There was a story anyway from Matt Moore also detailing the interest in Jay Crowder. Trailblazers are another team that's looking for wing help. They do have Gary Payton anyway, that's coming back from injury. He signed that 3-year, $29 million deal with the Trailblazers this offseason, and he's just getting his feet wet there in Portland. We'll see how their defense improves with the addition of Payton to their lineup, but if they make the move for Crowder as well, that's a team that's really would have improved their defensive side of the ball that they haven't really addressed in years. They've always gone more offense first. This would be the first real time that they're trying to address that since the Robert Covington trade from a few years ago. But we'll see how, which direction these teams ultimately decide to go. But as of right now, it seems like they could be a little bit both buyer and seller. One team that is most certainly going to be a seller is the Utah Jazz, and that's just because they have a whole bunch of expiring deals. They have a whole bunch of tradable contracts that they can move, and they're looking to gain assets. They're right now in the play-in tournament. They've done a nice job. I told you guys at the time, at the trade for Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, they got enough talent back in those deals to at least tread water around the 8th spot in the West, and that's about where they are right now. Now, they could move Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, among others, here at the deadline, maybe even Colin Sexton, to acquire even more first-round picks. Remember, they got a first-round pick in return for Royce O'Neal. They got 3 from the Cavs. They got 3 from the Timberwolves, including swaps from the Timberwolves as well. They got a good player in Markkanen anyway, who's really taken a nice step with the Jazz this year. The only 2 players that are not tradable by the Jazz are off limits anyway, untouchables for them, would be Lauri Markkanen and Kessler, who they got from the Minnesota Timberwolves last year. But outside of that, if you're interested in one of their players, they were more than willing to listen. We saw that earlier in this video anyway, when I was talking about Dorian Finney-Smith, he's been one player that the Utah Jazz are actually eyeing to come into their team. So maybe if they're willing to trade, from their bevy of first-round picks that they've gained over the past year or so, maybe something like that could work, or maybe even a 3-team trade that allows the Mavericks to get their superstar that they're wanting, allow some of those picks to go from Utah along with the Mavericks picks to get one of those big mega superstars out there. But as of right now, it doesn't look like there's one obvious candidate right now on the trade block outside of maybe a Zach LaVine. But is he really worth 4 first-round picks? I don't think so. 2 first-round picks, very likely, and that may ultimately be the best superstar, quote-unquote, on the market right now, but I don't really see that happening because, again, I think the Bulls are just going to try to tread water and see if they can make a run this year. But as I mentioned, I just think there's a ceiling on what the Bulls can do. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. If you have questions about what's happening around the NBA, feel free to send them to us. We'll be sure to try to answer your questions either in the comment section of one of our videos or in our next live. So make sure you join us, hit that subscribe button, follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We'll be live for you guys again tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Got a few videos coming out about the Super Bowl tomorrow. Got some coming out about the Bo Horvat trade in the NHL as well. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. A lot of news I'm expecting to happen in the next week. If there's going to be big superstars dealt, they're going to probably be dealt a couple of days before the deadline, just because of all the medicals you want to make sure you get right. You don't want to wait till the last minute to acquire, a franchise-altering piece for your organization. You want to make sure everything is going to work just the way you expect it to in order to get that to happen. So keep your eyes peeled around the end of this week, the beginning of next, for some of the biggest trades to happen. And then on trade deadline day, we will be live for you guys February 9th. We'll be live for you guys the entire day, breaking down every single trade as it happens, all the way through the deadline and probably a couple hours after. But thank you guys for joining us here at the Upside. Hit that subscribe button. We'll keep you guys updated on all the latest from the trade deadline in the NBA and the NHL. The Super Bowl is right around the corner in the NFL, and the hot stove season is still underway for Major League Baseball. Pitchers and catchers report in a couple of weeks, so we'll get back into some baseball coverage as well for you guys. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight, and we'll see you guys next time.